These were all forms of mind control to get somebody and large groups of people to do what the religious leaders and government officials wanted them to do. So a lot of the stories that you read about in the Bible are actually allegorical stories, or even stories about sacrifice and ritual and programming, the details of which we will discuss tomorrow. But just to give you a background on the history of these things that you thought were ordinary or mundane really are not. So if you take the combination of Atlantean, Celtic, Egyptian and Sumerian religious rites and beliefs were all morphed over the centuries and millennium into ritual and ceremony under umbrella organizations, many of which still survive today under different formats. And all of it was based initially on the Lemurian/reptilian lifestyle, which involves complete mind control and programming in order to ensure the continuation of the Draco or draconian civilization. Now, over the years, different civilizations use different methods. For example, the Roman Empire, and even into the early 20th century, programming was done via potions, torture, blood ritual, and imprisonment, which were performed by secret societies and cults. Yes. The Roman Empire, and leading up into the 20th century, programming was done via potions, torture, blood ritual, and imprisonment, which were performed by secret societies and cults within the civilization. The governments used constant propaganda. Now, propaganda, would you consider to be mind control or programming? Be mind control, because it's really more the manipulation of another rather than a forced programming. In other parts of the world, for example, China, Japan, Mongolia, they used pure Lemurian techniques of torture, herbs, and mutilations, which, by the way, still exist and continue to this day. China, Japan, and Mongolia used pure Lemurian techniques of torture, herbs, and mutilations. The Inca and Maya and Aztec used potions, herbs, sacrifice, tattoos, and skin carvings for their programming purposes. American Indians used body paint, ritual, piercings, drumming, smoke, and tobacco. And some of the American Indian programming techniques were quite brutal. Some of you have seen the films or movies where they would have a central pole in the ground, and then they would have these strings or ropes hanging from it with hooks, and people would actually be pierced with the hooks through ribs, through other parts of their body, and then spun around on the pole.
Maybe like the Sunday.
Yes.
Do
you go over the American Indians?
American Indian used body paint, ritual, piercings, drumming. By the way, drumming is part of the sound frequency which opens up certain parts of the brain for programming. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Smoke and tobacco. Now, smoke and tobacco are two different things. Smoke is from the fire that they would create, and tobacco, of course, is what they would smoke separately. In India, they used tantric practices, which actually involve the chakra system, ceremony, incense, oils, and animal parts. And by the way, oils are becoming much more popular now for a reason. Yes, they do have purposes like the essential oils for healing techniques, etc., but they can also be used for programming. So you should be aware of that. Certain smells, certain combinations open up certain frequencies in the brain and enable you to be controlled and manipulated in a certain way. African tribes,
Are there specific oils that you will tell us about?
I will. In fact, tomorrow you're going to get a very long list that I will hand out of the drugs and oils, etc., that they use. Some of which may be surprising to you. African tribes used powders, roots, piercings and mutilations, rituals, and animal skins. The purpose of the animal skins was so that you would pick up the vibration or energy of a particular species and incorporate that within your own persona. And that is also a form of programming. And in Tibet,
Sorry, repeat that again.
yes, in Africa, they use powders, roots, piercings and mutilations, rituals, and animal skins. And in Tibet, it was the use of isolation, mental abuse, cold, altitude, inculcations, which is the mantras and the chanting. And despite what you've been told about Tibet, they actually were quite brutal. One of the things they did as far as mind control and programming was concerned was to actually take an initiate and drill a hole into their forehead until it reached the pineal gland, straight down. And then they would use drugs and other herbs and incense to activate the pineal gland. It was quite a painful, they actually went right through the bone.
Ram did a whole series of books about his initiations.
Very, very painful process. All of this as a background leads up into the 1930s and 1940s, when this was all brought together with the use of technology. Why was it necessary in the 20th century to use technology for mass mind control and programming? If you remember, I believe I discussed this with you a while back, in the 1860s, there was an Illuminati meeting in Europe for what they called Agenda 2000. That meant they gave themselves approximately 130 some odd years to achieve complete global domination. But remember, when you are a worldwide group of maybe a couple of 100,000 people, and you're up against billions, there are not enough weapons or soldiers to beat those odds. So logically and brilliantly, the most perfect way to achieve your goal is through mind control and programming of the entire global population in one form or another. And so they spent